Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to Earth Day Berks 2021. We're very excited to have another great discussion and presentation this morning. Joining us this morning is Brent Gross. Brent, thank you so much for being with us this morning. I know you have a little presentation for us that was prepared, and I would love if you could just introduce yourself and the presentation and tell us a little bit about what you do.
Happy to do it. And thanks to you guys, Courtney and everyone else at Berks Earth Day that put this together and invited us to participate. I'll be representing a couple of organizations. One, I get to wear this.
Nice.
This is Let the Sun Pay Your, I'm reading it in reverse, electric bill, but that's Solar United Neighbors. They're a statewide organization that is a really good contact for people that are interested in solar. They can give you technical advice and do all kinds of things, and they support policy issues in Harrisburg for us. So that's a good organization. And I also represent a group out of Philadelphia, All Together Now, Pennsylvania. And I'll when I put my slides up, I'll talk a little bit briefly about them.
Sure, I'll stop you for 1 second because I'll give a quick plug, because we actually have Judy joining us tomorrow at 1 p.m. to talk much more in depth about All Together Now, which is an amazing organization. You guys are laying some really wonderful groundwork, or building upon the groundwork all of you collectively have built already. So very excited to hear about that. And we also have Drew Oberholzer is going to be joining us tomorrow morning for a hemp panel. So just wanted to interject that, but go right away. Go ahead.
Judy's been in this for a long time, and she's got a lot of great stuff to share. So
absolutely. Thank you. Sorry to cut you off. I just wanted to let everybody know that was happening.
Not at all. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen, get my presentation going.
Great.
Can everybody see that?
Yes, sir.
Perfect. Okay, so today it's going to be two of us. One of us is going to be recorded. That's Phyllis Bloomberg. Phyllis and I are both volunteers with Solar United Neighbors, and Phyllis is a solar ambassador in the state. So, you know, she really has a passion for this, and she goes around and she talks about solar to all kinds of people. And so we're going to start. Well, I'm going to just introduce. A little bit. So there, I mentioned before about Solar United Neighbors. So Solar United Neighbors, there's a Pennsylvania operation, but it's a national organization, and they just do a lot of work. They're really good people and very knowledgeable about giving you technical support, but also doing something that we're not going to get into today, but solar co-ops. So helping communities put together kind of buying groups so they can get better prices on solar. So you'll get some contact information on them later. That's a good group to know about. And then the other group that I mentioned is All Together Now, Pennsylvania. And the thing that's interesting in today's talk is, because Philadelphia is a very urban setting and Berks County is a little more rural, this is really the focus for All Together Now, Pennsylvania. And if you tune into Judy's talk, you'll hear a lot about this, but we're really focused on trying to bring those rural and urban communities really back together, because in historical context, they were more connected supply chains between farmers and urban settings. And we want to get back to those connections, and to build a resilient, self-reliant regional economy. So we really look at it from kind of an economic perspective, and Judy's going to talk about that tomorrow. So just knowing that that's one of the connections I have to this. And so we're going to connect now to Phyllis's presentation. She's going to give an overview of everything about solar. And so it's a lot of information. Don't feel like you have to memorize or remember all of that. We can talk. We'll have time at the end for questions and answers, or questions anyway, hopefully some answers, but we're going to do her overview right now, and then that'll take about 15 minutes. And then I'm going to talk about a few things that aren't covered so deeply in her presentation, and then we'll ask for questions. So let's.
And yes, we can. And many people do get
I can hear it.
their
Okay.
sun
Now I'm going to
using
try to
solar power.
make it big screen.
I am a big supporter of solar power.
All right.
for
It
Are we,
is.
Good
we
job.
good?
Yes.
One, I am saving
Success.
money on my electricity
Okay.
bill.
No harm, no foul.
Two, solar installers are creating local, well-paying jobs. And three, I am reducing pollution and making the air cleaner. Solar power is easy to understand. Solar panels on your roof or on your lawn produce electricity. This electricity passes to inverters on the property to convert it to usable power in your home or business. The energy on your panels generated is used on site. If it's not used, it's an extra amount of energy, and that goes back into the grid. Depending on the size of your panels or array, the weather, and your electricity consumption, you may be overproducing electricity during the warmer months of the year. If you overproduce during some months, such as May or June, you will get a credit on your bill at the full retail value of that excess. Essentially, you can bank this energy. Then, during the other months of the year, such as December and January, your system might underproduce and you can use these excess credits. This is called net metering. Net metering allows you to produce extra electricity that you don't use and place it on the grid for someone else to use. This situation will make your electric meter run backward, and the utility will record your credit for producing extra on your electricity bill. In essence, the grid is acting like your battery backup. Annual energy bills are much lower. Mine are about 2/3 less than what they were previously. Your typical solar and house can save thousands of dollars over 30 years of time. There are enormous potential for solar power. The first one is economic development. There's a lot of economic benefits. Replacing 10% of our electricity generation with solar will equal $300 million in savings annually. They will attract billions of dollars in private investment and will create tens of thousands of jobs, as my local solar installer has already created a few jobs. Electricity cost savings using renewables provide a hedge against fluctuating fossil fuel prices and protect all consumers. When houses, businesses, and farms generate some or all of their energy, they buy less, so they're saving money. There's also energy diversity. Increasing renewables diversifies our electricity mix. Increasing renewables diversifies our electricity mix, which is important to build a more reliable grid. There are many health and environmental benefits of solar power. One of the biggest benefits of solar energy is that it results in very few air pollutants. An analysis by the National Renewable Energy Laboratory found that widespread solar adoption would significantly reduce nitrous oxides, sulfur dioxide, and particulate matter emissions, all of which can cause health problems. The National Renewable Energy Laboratory found that among other health benefits, solar power results in fewer cases of chronic bronchitis, respiratory and cardiovascular problems, and fewer lost workdays related to health issues. Unlike other ways that energy is generated, solar power does not use water or pollute water. Are solar panels toxic? In a word, no. Solar panels are not the same as your typical electronic waste, such as cell phones or tablets. Solar panel or modules are much more durable and have a lifespan similar to construction equipment of at least 10 to 20 years. They are not nearly as toxic as anti-solar advocates deem them to be. Yes, they do contain a small amount of heavy metals such as lead and cadmium. These metals do not leach from the modules into the environment under normal conditions or anticipated accidents such as storm damage or fires. Where can we put solar harvesting? I will illustrate the varied places solar panels can go. Solar power comes in many sizes. In 2019, more than 4/5 of Pennsylvania's net solar generation came from small generating systems, such as a rooftop system with generating capacity of 1 megawatt or less. However, real growth in solar power can take place with large-scale solar harvesting fields. They are most efficient because they cost less to build and they have much greater impact on the overall energy production. Pennsylvania, in rural townships and municipalities with a great deal of open space, have a good opportunity to earn extra income. Their officials should figure out how to write regulations that protects the community while lowering the development costs. Urban and suburban areas are also great places for putting solar panels. The picture on the left is from the parking lot of an outdoor activity store. Cars that park there in the summer do not get too hot because they do not bake in the sun. And if it rains or snows, the cars are protected. The picture on the right shows solar arrays of a block of old row homes in Philadelphia. Can you go solar for your own home, your business, or your land? The most suitable location for a rooftop solar PV system is a south-facing roof with little or no shading from nearby trees, chimneys, or other obstructions. Any shading on the system can reduce energy output, so it is important to assess the location of current trees and buildings around your home, as well as that of other obstructions that may exist around your home or in the future. Advances in solar power and inverter technologies can allow homes with east or west-facing roofs and moderate shading to benefit from solar power as well. You can call in a solar installer, and that person will do a no-cost site visit to your home, evaluate your home's solar potential, conduct a shading analysis, and let you know if you have enough area and potential to generate power. They will also calculate the size of the system that you will need based on your electricity use, the amount of solar power that you can put up, and how much you can accommodate. The cost of doing nothing or not going solar will cost you about $35,000 in the next 25 years. You are basically renting your electricity from the electricity company. Going solar is an investment. You will save about $20,000 over the next 25 years after you pay for the system. And this increases the value of your house. How will solar affect your home or business's value? Typically, solar systems add to the property's value. This is due to the fact that unlike electricity rates, solar rates will never go up. Thus, a solar system will insulate your house from rising electricity rates. Once the system has paid for itself, the electricity it generates is absolutely free. This is a great selling point for homes or businesses. Analysis by Zillow shows that solar can boost an average home by about 4%. Pennsylvania is losing farms to development. But instead of selling their land, farmers are starting to look at the option of leasing a portion of their farms for solar development. Solar developers are paying between $800 to $1,000 per acre per year for a 25-year lease. At that time, the solar will be removed and the soil will be in good condition to return to farming. These leases provide a steady income to farmers so they can hold on to their land and continue farming. Agrivoltaics combines solar and agricultural uses. This approach maximizes various land uses, incorporating grazing animals such as sheep and pollinator-friendly plants. The picture on the right is from a preserved farm with solar energy. It protects the farms while creating solar energy that is sold onto the grid for others to use. This project is the Keystone Solar Project and is located in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. Clayton Wood is a fourth-generation farmer to own his family farm in Adams County. His family was among the first to lease land to the project. In their case, more than 150 acres. Mr. Wood said, "On top of that financial stability, it feels good to be part of addressing climate change." And here is a quote from Clayton Wood. "I still feel like we're harvesting something and being good stewards of our land resources, which is exactly what farming is." Colleges and universities are also using solar electricity. Over the past few years, the population of bees has been dramatically declining. Elizabethtown College is putting in solar projects that also incorporate beehives, which provide co-benefits, including clean energy, land lease payments to farmers, and support for pollinators, which can help crops on adjacent farmland. Penn State has just announced that they're producing a huge solar farm just outside of Chambersburg. And Robert Cooper, the Senior Director of Energy and Engineering at Penn State, said, "Among the many benefits of this significant investment in solar-based electricity generation include cost savings, lower greenhouse gas emissions in support of Penn State's aggressive sustainability goals, economic development with job creation and income for host communities through the development of the Pennsylvania solar market." Solar field projects can also go over brownfields, according to the EPA. A brownfield is considered an ideal location for a solar plant as it is a cost-effective method for an otherwise useless body of land, such as a decommissioned mine, quarry, or contaminated site. While this is complicated, it is doable. The owners must cap the site and ensure there is no leakage of dangerous chemicals such as methane. But this step protects people and reduces pollution. New technology is developing ways that solar panels can safely be placed on top of landfills once the landfill is capped. Project developers, investors, government, and community organizations are coming together to resolve the socioeconomic and environmental issues associated with deploying solar energy fueled power stations at former coal plants, mines, and therefore hastening the transition from fossil fuel to emission-free renewable resources. To facilitate significant landfill solar development, state and local governments must offer specific incentives to compensate solar developers for the increased cost of installation and development on landfills. They need to stabilize the land where mining occurred against landslides. When a coalition of many stakeholders come together in an area, there can be real economic development and safe solar energy throughout many parts of Pennsylvania. Experts say that Appalachia provides a great opportunity for energy projects because many areas are already equipped with power stations and power lines from coal mining operations. Many of these initiatives will create jobs and stimulate the local economy. Many people cannot go solar for various reasons, such as they rent their property, they do not own their own home, and there may be too much shading on their roof, or they cannot afford to pay for the entire systems. Community solar allows multiple people to subscribe to a portion of a larger solar array, and then the energy that is generated from their system gets credited on their electric bill. Community solar is not legal in Pennsylvania now, but there is legislation to permit community solar. Urge your Harrisburg senator and representative to support community solar. Maybe you cannot afford the upfront costs. There are still other options to consider, and these are already viable. One, you might consider leasing your roof to investors who will install solar panels on your roof and sell you the power that you generate at a cheaper rate. Two, you can lease rather than own the solar panels and the system, and this has much lower upfront costs but does incur monthly charges. Or three, you can enter into an agreement with a solar company where they install the system on your property and you pay a set rate for the electricity system that your roof produces. You can also join a solar co-op. Joining a solar co-op can bring the cost down considerably because you take advantage of bulk purchasing power to get discounted pricing and quality installation. Solar co-ops are legal and are being used across the state. I hope you are excited about solar power. There are many different ways that you can install and use solar power. Here are some excellent resources that you can turn to learn more and also to find out whether or not your property is appropriate for solar. I recommend Solar United Neighbors of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania Solar Center, and the Pennsylvania Department of Energy Protection for many good resources.
Great. Thanks, Court. You're muted, Court. You're still muted, Courtney, I think.
Thank you. Sorry if you guys were hearing that second video there. I think if I stopped sharing, you didn't, so that's good.
No, it was fine.
It was going to the next video in the commercial. But thank you so much, Brent. And Phyllis, I'm sorry she couldn't join us, but she can feel free to contact us, and I'm sure if people have questions afterwards, we'll be able to, connect with Phyllis and yourself, and if anyone had any questions. But that was a great video. Just out of curiosity, did you guys have that like laying around, or did you specifically put that together for Earth Day?
No, Phyllis had that. So
Okay,
she got trained as a solar ambassador by, I guess, the PA Solar Center, which she mentioned there. And they're another great resource. So she put the link in there. They're based near Pittsburgh. And so we have, kind of different organizations at different parts of the state.
sure.
But they do similar things in some ways to Solar United Neighbors. They're good for technical support and training, but they also work on a lot of policy issues and bigger solar installations. Solar United Neighbors is really very focused on rooftop solar for homeowners. So thanks for getting that going, because that was an excellent overview. And
Definitely.
Yeah. So a lot of the stuff or a few of the things that I want to cover were touched on by Phyllis, but I'm just going to go a little bit deeper on those. And so if I can try again, I'm a little nervous about.
You got this. You got
this. Yeah. So I think I know what happened before, but so we're back to the presentation. So that was Phyllis's presentation. So the title is it? Can you see my screen?
I can. PA Solar's glass half full.
Great. Okay. So I was trying to be a little whimsical here, talking about half full or half empty, because I think that's something people relate to. But I just wanted to pick up on some of the things that Phyllis talked about a little bit, and go slightly deeper and talk about Pennsylvania being a very interesting state, because it is a complicated place where we are seeing a lot of solar growth, a lot of new installations going in. Just to give you a quick background, I was working for a solar installer in Philadelphia, and around 2013 or 14, we were actually at 3 people. We were 3 people working there, because it was just, there were no incentives
Wow.
in Pennsylvania, and it was just a tough time after the Great Recession. And we were hanging in there, but just barely. And now I'm no longer active with the company, but now I understand that they're up to 32 or so employees,
Wow.
and they're just as busy as they can be. So, in a certain sense, the glass is half full. There's a lot of support you see on this slide here. Overwhelmingly, when people are polled about support for solar or wind or any kind of renewable energy, there is a lot of support in the public for that. And we have a lot of great companies across the state that have weathered some tough times, and the weaker companies didn't make it through those tougher times, those leaner years. But the ones that made it through are really solid companies, and they know a lot about installing solar on any kind of rooftop or some kind of field or something, and at all different kinds of scale. So really low scale, or what we'll talk about in a minute, utility scale, so really big installation. So that's the half full perspective.
Gotcha.
And one way to capture that, you don't need to look in a too detailed a way at this graph of solar growth over time, but you can see this period. I don't know if you can see my cursor.
Yes, I can. Yeah, you're
So-
like 2014-ish.
Yeah. So this was the tough time here. There wasn't a lot going on. Earlier on, we had some incentives in the state, and you could see that solar was actually growing pretty well, and then that tapered off during the recession. But if you look at this in 2020, this amazing growth, and that lighter blue color is actually utility scale. So those are the really big installations. And Phyllis mentioned in her presentation that she mentioned the Penn State installation, which was 70 megawatts, which is a huge installation. Well,
Wow.
there are multiples of those. The city of Philadelphia did a similar size one, and now I'm trying to think of the other ones, but most recently, the Governor Wolf announced that the state will actually put in a huge installation, which will cover a large percentage of the state's electricity use. So this is something that I wanted to highlight, this growth, because it's part of the half full thing, but it's also important that we think about, we want to be careful with policy, that we don't let these huge installations get away from us, and that we don't want out-of-state developers to come in, but we don't want them overwhelming the market with development that gets away from us and is not a positive thing for people in these communities and farmers or whoever the landowners are. We don't want people being taken advantage of. So we want people in Harrisburg to be looking out for those large installations. And speaking of Harrisburg, the half empty part of solar in Pennsylvania for me is that we really have very few incentives right now that are supporting solar. One that I'll talk about in a second is renewable energy credits, which we don't want to get into because that's a longer topic to really deal with, and we could do that at another time, but we don't want to do that today. But I just want you to have in the back of your mind that that is really the only existing incentive for solar, and that's not very strong, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute. But there is a lot of resistance from some of the politicians, not all, but some of the politicians in Harrisburg, and a lot of that resistance comes from, you guessed it, follow the money, lobbyists, and a lot of people make jokes about, there are more lobbyists than legislators in Harrisburg or something, but we do need to be careful that we're holding our legislators accountable for supporting things that we as Pennsylvanians support across the state. And that one of the things that is currently being looked at in Harrisburg is community solar legislation, and Phyllis touched on that. And that's a crucial way of expanding the solar market, and we just need to be very vocal with our legislators to let them know that we want that. It's a very commonsensical process or application of solar, where you have someone who has a land or rooftop could install solar and make that or parts of that available to people, to people that don't have the ability to do that. So that's part of the half empty. And then you might want to think about, like, we have a half full glass, but it's cracked and it's leaking because we don't have the vision, we don't have the drive from our policymakers to keep us moving ahead. We were at times in a very strong position for creating renewable energy jobs. We've fallen back to where we're kind of in the middle of the country. We're in the 20, we're ranked, 20 something for creating renewable energy jobs. And we are an energy state. I mean, we always have been with nuclear and with coal and with natural gas, for sure. We've always been on the leading edge of energy production and innovation, and we want to stay in that position. So we want to put pressure on politicians and legislators to look out for the benefits and make sure the benefits of energy, and make sure that they're going to everyone. They're going to the workers, not just the investors. They're going to rural people as well as urban. So these are things that we want to keep an eye on, and we want to hold our legislators accountable about. So I'm going to touch briefly on three things that I've just mentioned, and that Phyllis mentioned in her presentation, and that is the idea of agrivoltaics. So that's the combination of solar and farming. I'm going to touch on that really briefly first, and then a little bit about some current policy issues that we want to talk to we want to be writing and calling our legislators about. And the important thing, as I'm presenting from Philadelphia to people in Berks County, is that we need this to be a statewide effort. We can't just have people in, certain communities that are pressuring their local legislators. We have to have statewide pressure to do that. So solar on farms, we could really spend a ton of time on this, and I just love this whole topic of
Same. I'm so glad I specifically asked you to cover some of this, because I think it's so exciting and something new, and people have no clue that this is going on. So I'm really happy you're covering it.
Great. And covering is probably being generous to me on that. But what I would say is, it's just, once you learn a little bit about it, you just see how many synergies there are between agriculture and solar, and how it has benefit. It's just one of those things that's win, win, win. It's good for the farmer. It's good for people who can't necessarily access solar directly on their own. It's, and it works from a practical perspective. You see here, I just included a brief, just the logo from the Pennsylvania Farmers Union. They support renewable energy, and that includes solar and wind on farms, but also using agriculture-based products for renewable energy. So that, we could spend a lot of time talking about that, but just to know that the Farmers Union is supportive of this, I think, is important. Yes. And when I say co-benefits between solar and ag, you can, once you start thinking about, if you have essentially these mini roofs, so if you think about a ground mount solar installation, and I'll have a graphic or a photo later, but you saw one earlier. So you have these solar panels that are on post, and they're above the ground, and they're broken up between, so you don't have a solid roof over the ground, so you're blocking all, rain, sun, etc. This is broken up over the ground. So the benefits that can happen are, you can actually grow things under the solar at the same time that you're essentially harvesting. If you look at the last bullet there, where a farmer was quoted as saying, electrons produced are just another crop to them, you know. So if you're
Yes.
producing solar and electrical energy, but you're producing certain plants that will thrive under
The
this.
shade.
They're being protected from, you know, the beating sun and those, you know, we have these tough summers sometimes now in Pennsylvania where we have strings of 100-degree days or something, and that's brutal on plants and the soil. So if you're covering them part of the day from that sun, you actually are retaining moisture. You're protecting the plants from overheating. So there's that benefit. At the same time, those plants are actually cooling the solar. So they're just because of the way, you know, they grow, they're and the shade and the way that they grow, they are protecting the solar from underneath. They're cooling the backside of the solar, and solar is way more efficient and productive and performs better when it's cooler. So I find that I'm going too far on this, but so
I'm
there's
loving
these synergies
it.
between the two, and then that's not even getting into the opportunity to have uh, pollinators. You can have bees that are you know on this, you know, contiguous or at the same location, co-located with the solar. You can also be grazing. Uh, Mostly people are grazing sheep, but if you know, get the panels to a certain height, and if you know, I mean, people are researching a lot of this still, but you could potentially graze cattle. I mean, people are doing it, but it's not optimal yet, or people haven't quite figured out how to do that. So there are all these things that can work together and produce a really great situation for a farmer. So there's some great videos available. There's one that Solar United Neighbors did with some researchers down in Maryland, and it's just excellent for understanding uh, what it means for like a sheep farmer or a sheep raising operation to also have solar. And they talk about that, and it just makes it very clear how that's a win-win for them.
I-
So that's probably all I'm going to say on solar on farms. If there are questions, I'll certainly try to address them in the Q&A if I can, or if I can't, I'll get back to you with an answer on that.
No, that's great. I just wanted to point out something that I heard Phyllis say when she touched on it too, is that it also provides an additional stream of revenue for the farmers, which is always really helpful.
Certainly, yeah. I didn't really mention that, but of course, if somebody is, you know, leasing your land, if they're putting solar, installing solar on your land, and exporting that energy off your land, you're going to be compensated for that,
Yeah.
and it's pretty. You know, she mentioned something, you know, in the roughly in the $1,000 an acre per year realm, I think, and I think, you know, that adds up, and it's a really good additional revenue source for a struggling farmer, and
Yeah,
we know that there are a lot of struggling farmers these days. So
definitely.
yeah, that's a great thing to keep in mind. The next thing I wanted to touch on was, and this is a topic which is deeply boring, and that's partly the reason I included that graph, that economics graph to the right there, that's talking about supply and demand. You don't need to understand this at all. You might want to be familiar with that term, SREC. That just means it's an incentive that you earn, or the owner of a solar array, a solar system, earns just based on the production of electricity from their system. So it's not about selling your electricity. It's not about somebody else taking access to your electricity. You still use your electricity in any way you choose to use it, but you get this renewable energy credit, which has a value. And the thing that I want to point out about that, and we don't want to get into this graph, honestly, it's just kind of a joke, but the state mandates how much renewable energy the utilities are required to have in their mix. So currently, and that how that's mandated is complicated, but the piece that is solar is mandated to be 0.5% of the total energy generation mix for utilities. So
Wow.
I mean, that's such a small number, you can't
Sure.
imagine it, a half a
Yeah.
percent. So that mandate is captured, and I really honestly don't want to get into this about AEPS. That's the Alternative Energy Portfolio System. And all you need to know here is that the state mandates through this AEPS mechanism uh, the demand from utilities for these SRECs. And if that demand is low, and compared to most other states, and certainly our neighboring states, New Jersey, New York, Maryland, all of these states have much higher mandates.
Yeah.
So the demand is higher, and that drives prices up for the SREC. And so that's where it impacts the owner of the solar. If the SREC price is higher, then you're getting more money on an annual basis, or however you're generating,
Sure.
how much electricity you're generating, than you would at these lower demand rates. So to say simply, the solar mandate, which is APS, Alternative Energy Portfolio System, which just is captures renewable energy that's required in the portfolio of utilities, that drives higher SREC values. So if your AEPS or your solar mandate is higher, you have higher SREC values, and that makes solar more affordable because the economics work out better. You're earning a stream of revenue going forward after you install the solar. And the bottom line is you get more solar being installed. So from top to bottom, you're increasing the demand for solar, for renewable energy credits, and you, by doing that, you're increasing the supply of that. So more people are going to install solar. So the point of going through all of this is our renewable portfolio standard, that AEPS mandate, essentially ends this year in May. And that began in 2004. And it was actually, at the time, it was a decent policy, but we've just stopped. This is one of the cracks in the half full glass. We've just stopped working on that. So we need to contact legislators and let them know, because right now there's legislation, I'll get to that too, that they need to expand that, right away, because that standard is going to stop in the next month or so, and it's going to hold level at the current level, which is very low. So to give you a sense of how that plays out in the market, we have our very low AEPS or mandate for solar. And so those SRECs, which again, you don't need to know too much about, sell for $23 each. There's a market for SRECs. And so it's an open market, and the price changes all the time. But in Pennsylvania right now, it's around $25. In Washington and New Jersey and Maryland, where they have much higher demand or mandates for solar, look at the prices for those. So you can imagine, if you have the same solar array in Pennsylvania as someone in Washington, DC, and they're earning $410 for every megawatt hour for every SREC that they're awarded, and you're earning $23, that yours is a much less attractive proposition, right? So much less solar is going to be built in Pennsylvania than in DC. And so you can kind of see here, and again, I don't want to put too much information, too many graphs or thing, but I wanted you to see that when we had incentives, and this doesn't go all the way back to 2004, but you can see we were up around $300 back in 2010.
Wow.
So the incentives were there in 2010, and then they disappeared as we took a different perspective in Harrisburg about how we're going to deal with renewable energy, and they just plummet down to almost zero.
Wow.
For all of those years, and they've now gone slightly back up towards $25 or $30. But we took this. You can just see the impact over time of how we set that mandate in Harrisburg. So the stronger mandate, APS, is a benefit to all of us. It allows more homeowners, churches, businesses, everyone to install more solar. It leads to cleaner air, lower carbon emissions. We haven't really talked about greenhouse gas emissions, and this is Earth Week, right? And we should be concerned about climate change, but that's just part of it. The economics are also very critical things. And if you look at what we talked about just a second ago, and Courtney brought up about farmers, if a farmer is hosting a solar array and they're getting paid this kind of money, it really helps at the end of the day for them to stay in business, keep the farm in the family, and to develop all of that solar that we're talking about here. We're going to generate a lot of jobs and a lot of revenue for local townships.
Absolutely.
So right now, these are two of the legislators, so that it's bipartisan. So this is a Philadelphia Democrat and a Erie, Pennsylvania Republican, have introduced legislation to basically do a 10-fold or 11 times increase in the mandate from 0.5% to 5.5%. So that sounds still modest to me, but that's a huge increase, and that would lead to lots of new solar, lots of new jobs, a much better environment, and a real win for different parts of the state that could really use some revenue flowing into their communities. So these are two of our legislators that we want to thank and we want to reach out to, but we want to reach out to our local legislators and let them know that we support this expansion. And then the last thing I want to mention in terms of policy is this idea of community solar. And again, we're not going to talk about it too much, but as Phyllis mentioned in her presentation, obviously some people can't install solar on their roof. Maybe they don't have the money, maybe they're renters, maybe their roof is shaded or it's facing the wrong direction. So a lot of people won't be able to install solar. If you allow a farmer or some other business entity that has a roof or a field to install solar, and then basically allow that production to be assigned to those different subscribers, essentially. So this is being done in almost more than half of the states in the US have community solar as an option. And oddly, Minnesota is one of the leaders in this. You can imagine, like, oh, they don't have enough solar for that's a positive, productive, practical thing to do. But they're a leader in community solar, and they got into this early. They've proven it over years, and it's been a very effective mechanism for them to get a lot of solar built.
That's great.
So as we said, we want, contact legislators, write letters to your local editor, talk to people in your community. You can reach out to Solar United Neighbors or to myself or Phyllis or Courtney can direct you to people to reach out to, and we're happy to come and meet with you or to give you support for how to write a letter to your editor or what to say to your legislator if you get them on the phone. So we can support you in that effort. And then last of all, I like this photo. I grabbed this earlier. So these are, probably some researchers. I see a guy there with a pad of paper, so he's probably not a farmer, but these are people looking at these solar panels that are installed above. And so maybe these are crops that are specifically there to enhance or improve the soil. These could be really deep-rooted plants that hold moisture and then dig deep into the soil. And really what we have found in research is if you decide after, like, let's say a farmer decides to put in solar and decides after 25 years he's done with it, he wants them removed, which will be built into his contract. He or she could leave them on and keep going because they will last that long, or they could have them removed. If it's done properly, when those things are removed, the soil is actually way better than it was when they were installed, because over time, you've protected them from baking the soil, you've put in these deep-rooted plants, you've You've done a lot of things to actually bring value to the soil. So I just wanted to close on that for my part of the presentation, to thank everyone for participating in this Earth Week presentation and other Earth Week activities, and to thank you for inviting us. There's some contact information there, and I'm happy to take questions.
Yes,
So,
and we do have some extra time. I think if you saw that, we can go over a bit. So we have some time for questions or to continue the conversation.
great.
Risa, did we have anyone that online that was asking anything?
We do have some questions, but I have one of my own first. So you mentioned contacting your legislators. Is there a particular bill number that is already on the docket that we can refer to?
Good question.
There is. Yeah, that's a great question. I should have that handy. Am I still sharing my screen? I don't know if you want to.
No, not at the
Not
moment.
anymore.
Let's see if I can get that. I have those numbers, and if I had somebody to look for that. Let's see. So let's see, Henry.
And we could probably contact the two main co-sponsors and get that information. So.
Yeah.
It might even be up on the website, probably.
Yeah. Has it been introduced yet?
Yes, they have.
Okay.
All right. Both houses, they've been introduced, and it's something like 550. I don't know if that's on the House or Senate side.
Okay, I'll get that information out. I'll look it up and.
Yeah, I mean, I can do it after and get it to you. But they're definitely there, and it would be easy enough to get it.
Yeah.
I don't work well in real time, so.
No problem. Yeah, if you can
Okay.
email it to me, Bren, and then I'll make sure I incorporate it in any of our follow-up stuff connected
That would
to
be
this,
great.
this
Yeah.
session.
So the
Go
other
ahead.
comment and question we have is from Bill, and he says, I have trees around my house, so solar will not work for me. Any idea what amount of ag land is capturing solar? Like in the state, how much are we?
Like what piece of the
How much ag
pie,
land is
like what
already doing?
percentage?
Yeah. Right now, or
I
has
guess.
the potential. I mean, it's pretty low right now, to be honest.
Yeah,
I mean,
okay.
I showed that graph that showed that really large increase in what we call utility scale, but these large scale installations. I mean, I forget the size of the governor's announcement, but I think so. The one for the city of Philadelphia, which I think covers about a third of our municipal electricity use, was about 70 megawatts. So that's a lot of land. I don't know how many. I'm trying to think how many acres that is in Adams County. Could be something like 500. There's a ratio that's pretty straightforward about how many megawatts you can get for how many acres. But the state's announcement is 200. It's like 3 times that. So that's a huge installation. So no one wants to see a carpet of solar panels on endlessly over hundreds of acres. So they have ways of trying to kind of manage that. And I know for sure the RFP, well, the proposal, the request for proposal that went out from Philadelphia and from Penn State have very clear guidelines for how the land is managed. So they have stiff requirements on, pollinator friendly plants around that. They really have done a lot of research, and because they're cities, they're not just like, they want the cheapest solar and they want to maximize what they can get out of it. They're really wanting to do something that's beneficial for the community. So they have and Penn State has been a leader on this. They've done a lot of research. They have a scorecard essentially for the things that you would want to include in that, and the Penn State extension people can guide you on that, and they can give you not only direct advice, but they can give you the scorecard. They have all kinds of information they can provide you if you're interacting with if you're as a farmer or as a municipality, if you're interacting with a developer, because you want to come from a place of knowledge and kind of strength. You don't want to go in saying I don't know anything about this, and about what I should be paid or about what can be used. But we do want to be careful. I think in the early days, really like companies were coming in and like bulldozing off the topsoil and selling that separately and putting, it was just kind of bad. But
Right.
that's come miles. And
That's
so
great.
people are really, putting in breaks between these large arrays and plantings that make sense, and really trying to make them so they're not, so that people wouldn't complain about them being an eyesore or something.
Right.
So
Yeah, I think that answers Bill's second question, was about can farmers grow crops and harvest around solar installations? So
yeah, well,
I hope we took care of it. Bill, you can always unmute and ask us yourself.
yeah, feel free. And I'm not super knowledgeable on that, but what I would say is information is coming out on this on a daily basis, it seems like. So people have discovered, oh my God, maybe I could do this, maybe I could do that. So maybe if I put the panels higher, I can put different crops under them. Maybe if I space them differently, I could put, different crops under them. Maybe if I have goats, I could do that, but I don't want them climbing or jumping on them, So,
Don't damage them.
Up
it seems
higher.
like sheep are very manageable. So that's an easy thing. But I think they're learning all the time, the kinds of I did read like cherry tomatoes, and I think certain jalapeno peppers or something, certain crops do work well in this setting. Like they just, they flourish under these things. So you get actually increased yields on those productions, and then cooler panels. So the performance, I don't know how much it goes up. I guess it depends on how much the temperature is brought down by whatever you've planted, but it goes up, a significant amount. It's not 1%. It's, more than that. Let's see, what else do we have?
Yeah, Bill, did you have something
Anything
else
else,
to
Bill?
attach to that?
I think that, whoops, where's my phone, my camera? I think that Senate Bill 472 might be the Senate bill you were trying to find. Authorizes small scale community solar projects with 20 co-sponsors and by.
Yeah, so there's a couple of issues so there's two things that we talked about. We talked about expanding the solar mandate. And unfortunately, you very quickly get into all these acronyms, which I didn't want to, I wanted to avoid, but you can't really avoid. So AEPS, it's hard to even say the acronym, SRECs, those things can get complicated really quickly, but all you want to think about is that's the mandate for solar of the utility. So that's one thing that they're working on, expanding the AEPS. So that is not the community solar bill. The community solar bill is a separate thing. We also need to look at the actual wording of the legislation. So there's some concerns that folks are monkeying around with the language of a community solar bill. So you think, oh, community solar, we want to support it. We need to be careful. So we need to talk to people who are knowledgeable about what's in the legislation and who it's really supporting. Is it supporting farmers, community members, low-income subscribers, that kind of thing, or is it supporting big investors? And there's some concern that, and I don't know if it's Bill 472, but there's some concern that the current community solar legislation is okay on some counts, but needs some attention on others. So we want to talk to people like the PA Solar Policy, the Solar Center, to get their take on that, and make sure we're not just like blindly supporting something because it says community solar. So I can't say, those are still in the works. People are still, proposing those and working on those and debating those. Nothing has come up for a vote as far as I know. So there's the community solar side, and then there's the AEPS solar mandate expansion. And that's more critical, as wonky, as weird as it sounds. That's really critical to driving the market.
Okay. All right, it's good that there's people we can reach out to and get the fine the fine tuning that's needed on these pieces of legislation, because that's an important thing. Sometimes they can be a little tricky.
So Brent,
thanks.
I was kind of curious to see if my kind of understanding of the higher mandate that we want to ask for in the state, it's almost, is it almost essentially holding the energy companies accountable for even having that choice available to customers. Is that kind of what the end game is, or, that
Yeah,
they have?
I mean, essentially, if you think about it, it's just, and I'm trying to think of an analogy that makes sense for people, but yeah, what you've said, so between the customer and the utility is the Public Utility Commission, right? So they're supposed to be dealing with this for us, us
On our
regular
behalf
people.
of the consumers. Yeah.
Right, consumers and different communities. And so they're the ones that should really be taking care of this, and they are right now. They're managing this, but we have this thing that goes back, what is that, 17 years to 2004, and it just doesn't make sense today. I mean, that made sense in 2004, the mandate. So what we said through the PUC to the utility companies is, you need to have out of your mix a minimum of, and the solar is just one part of it. There's other renewable energy components in there, but you need to have a minimum of this, and then the rest of it you can do with natural gas or coal or hydro or whatever else well, not hydro because that's renewable, but oil, whatever you want. But this piece of this wedge in the pie, has to be this much. And so we want them to say, well, that wedge now needs to be not 0.5%, but a lot more. And I didn't show a graph, which I had, for New Jersey, Maryland, New York, and all those places are 50% by
Wow.
2030, 100% by 2050 or 2030. I mean, they are recognizing that with climate change and with environmental and health issues, we need to move aggressively. And
Yeah.
we are a natural gas state. We have a lot of money and interest that are looking out for natural gas, and we need to be careful that we balance those things, and we look out for the health of the planet, the health of the communities where that stuff is being sited, and the future of future generations, that they have a healthy place to live.
Absolutely. So I know usually a big barrier to kind of moving forward and improving in these areas is just awareness,
Yeah.
of consumers, of companies, even of larger scale, potential investors. So is right now, like, how do you feel about kind of the collective efforts of, organizations like the ones that you represent and Penn State Extension? And is everyone really kind of working together to spearhead, and is there programming going on, other than things like, these sessions?
I would say we have a ways to go. I mean, there's a lot of good people and a lot of good organizations working on this stuff, and they're doing, really good things
Good
on their
work.
own, and there's some working together, but there's a lot. I think you put it in a good way. There's a lot of headroom. There's a lot of upside potential for doing a better job of letting people know this. You can see from some of the stuff I said, it gets kind of detailed, and people don't want to get bogged down. We're all so busy with our lives, right? We don't want to get bogged down in, wait, expanding the AEPS, what does that mean to me, and why should I care about that? So you find pockets of people that are like, I'm sure the people that are participating in this today, that are really interested in working on this, but we really need to get it up some, because polling says, I don't know what the percentages are, but I know they're in the 70+% of people support expansion of renewable energy. So how do we get that huge percent of people to lend their voice to what we're trying to do? So maybe they don't have time to write a letter to the editor or to call their legislator, but maybe they can do something else. Maybe they can contribute. Okay, I don't have the time to do that, but I will contribute to the work that these other organizations are doing. Or maybe they want to learn much more about, it can be as small as, one of the things I participate in every year, which is also done by Solar United Neighbors, is the National Solar Home Tour. So,
Cool.
you open up your home and people come by and they talk to you about solar, and it's really fun, so that's a really tiny micro event. You know, it's 8 people that stop by in the course of a couple of hours. But you know, that's how you get
That's how the word
information out.
spreads, right? Yeah. And
Yeah.
that word of mouth and people just being more aware of it and spreading it. Yeah. I'm curious to know, I don't know if you know this personally, but how in the agricultural community, how people are getting to learn about this and how farmers are reacting. Like, is there a lot of pushback? I know sometimes it's hard to make those changes and to kind of see more farms as businesses and
Yeah.
how to expand things in ways that makes sense in one way. But if you've been doing something for generations,
Right.
it's hard to make those changes. So how are you, are you seeing things like that, or how are you addressing those? Or
Yeah, I think again, a lot of people are doing great work on that Penn State extension, and I'm trying to think how I'll get this link to this video that I mentioned about these researchers that were working with these sheep farmers. I think it was in Maryland. So people are working on it, and I don't think there's necessarily pushback. I think farmers are like all of us, you know, where we have a lot of inertia built in, you know, like this is how we do things, so we've always done it. I'm interested. I want to keep my farm going, and I like the idea of some additional revenue, but it seems like another thing I have to learn, and I'm really busy. I'm working my butt off doing my real thing.
it's just one more big thing to have to worry about, right?
Yeah. And the thing that can help on that, but can also get in the way, is companies that, whether they're developers or solar installers, solar contractors, can help with that, just like they help homeowners figure out, you know, whether solar works for them. They can help farmers figure that out too. But we don't want farmers being taken advantage of, and that's a concern I personally have. That
It's definitely,
you know, that if some big money people come in from out of state, and this is altogether now Pennsylvania, is we want to build Pennsylvania wealth, Pennsylvania resilience, Pennsylvania resources and jobs. You know, that's our focus. So we don't want lawyers, you know, coming into, I can imagine a meeting where a farmer's sitting there and there are 5 lawyers.
pushing them around, you know.
Yeah.
We know what's good for you. Listen to us.
but maybe that's not really what's happening. But I do think the more we, you know, educate farmers through, you know, the normal channels like the Farmers Union or Penn State Extension, or, you know, wherever they have a place where they come together, that we can get the word out. And I would, you know, we have talked at All Together now about trying to get out, and the pandemic obviously was not a big help with that, but to get out and go community to community and just bring farmers in and say, you know, this is what we know. Nobody knows everything about this, but let's talk through this and let's figure out what additional information you need.
Absolutely.
And get that to you, and get some analysis done about how it would impact you financially, and where you could put it on your land, what makes sense. I mean, you don't want to be taking a lot of great farm land out of use.
And we're very much conscious about that here in Berks, but you know who to contact to connect to Berks County. We are going to wrap it up. I want to thank you so much for all this wonderful information, Brent. Thank you so much for helping me put it together and being here this morning. And we really appreciate your time. And we will have this available for people after the fact. And if you could get me the video by itself, we could also maybe feature that.
Oh, okay. Yeah. No, it's excellent. And actually, when you put up this recording, I guess I can put in the comments some of the links I've mentioned.
Shoot me a separate email. Either way. Yeah, that'd be great. Any other resources would be fantastic, and we'll just connect that to it after the fact. But we're gonna wrap it up, and thank anyone who did pop in on Facebook. But otherwise, we'll have it available. And so appreciative of your time and expertise. And please thank Phyllis on our behalf.
I will.
Yes.
And we'll be in touch soon. This won't be the end of the conversation.
Sounds good. Thanks so much for doing all this. Good luck with the rest.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Brent.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, Brent. Thanks,
Take
Risa
care.
and Bill. Thanks, guys. Have a great rest of your day.
You too. Bye.
Bye.